This is the Microsoft Cloud Show, episode 43, where we're going to share our favorite Office 365 and SharePoint resources, recorded live August 18th, 2014. Welcome to the Microsoft Cloud Show, the only place to stay up to date on everything going on in the Microsoft Cloud world, including Windows Azure, Office 365, SharePoint, Exchange, Lync, and related technologies. Just the information, no marketing, no BS. I'm Chris Johnson.
And I'm Andrew Cole.
And we're just two dudes telling you how we see it. Well, good morning.
Good morning. How are you doing this morning, CJ?
Very well. Yeah, not too bad. It's beautiful and sunny up here in Seattle, so we've had an absolutely banging summer, which has been awesome. And another beautiful day in the Pacific Northwest, as per usual. So what have you been cooking on? What's been going on?
I'm just plugging through work stuff, just same old. It's been, I guess, like so many other people out there, it's time for kids to start going back to school. We're recording this a little unusual. We're recording this today on a Monday, and today was the first day of school for my county, and I sent my fourth grader off, which was no big deal, and we've done that a few times. He was totally cool. But I sent my youngest off to kindergarten for the first day, and so there was a bit of stress, a bit of drama, the whole like, all right, you got to get this time, we have to eat right now, and then we have to be out the door, and you have to go to the bathroom before we leave. But I don't want to eat right now. It's like, well, no, you have to eat right now because you won't be able to eat again until lunch. You go, well, I don't have to go to the bathroom now. Like, we're going to be in a car line for 30 or 40 minutes. So you're going to, there's a brand new school less than a mile from us. And it's in that distance that's fine to walk or ride bikes. But with a kindergartner, it's a little long for her to walk to go to the first day of school. And I mean, I live in Florida, and so every afternoon there's a 50-50 chance of having some pretty violent thunderstorms, and having them walk home right now is it's a little dicey.
Yeah, that'd be great being caught in a thunderstorm with a kindergartner.
A mile away. So it was a little stressful this morning and stuff. It was a little bit of chaotic, but it was all well and good, and I'll be a little selfish and just say that I love the fact that my house is absolutely silent right now.
Glorious. Glorious. Yes, my kids are on school holidays still, and so my house is far less than silent. Yes.
How about you? What you been up to?
Well, I have my father is visiting from New Zealand, so I've been showing him around a little bit. He's obviously come over. He's not really here for me. He's here for his grandkids, really. So long as everybody knows that, we're all good. And then I backed a Kickstarter project about a year ago called Elite Dangerous, which is used to be an old school video game that I spent more time as a youth on than I care to remember, on a C64 back then. And so I backed the Kickstarter about 12 months ago, I suppose, and it's just come out for the PC, and God, is this good.
I watched a trailer or two from what you posted on Facebook over the weekend. It's pretty cool. So what's it all about?
It's a very interesting game because it's all based in space, but it's a mixture of combat, but also trading and strategy. So you're in this huge open, free-range sort of universe, right? There's thousands of different places you can go. You can trade between different planets and different systems and all that sort of stuff. You can go fighting people. You could do missions. You could do all this different stuff. You can equip your ship and do. It's very complicated. There's a lot to the game, and it's just as good as I remember as a kid playing it. But the one final thing on this is you really need a joystick to play it. Playing it with the mouse and keyboard's a pain in the butt. So I thought, I've got a joystick. So I went and got the joystick out of a box in the garage, and it's a Microsoft Force Feedback Sidewinder 2 joystick, right? Which I bought somewhere prior to 2002. Right, so just let that sink in for a second. That's 12 years ago. Somewhere prior to that. It is USB, and I swear this is possibly the first USB device on the planet. It's got to be that old. And I was like, oh, plug it in and see what happens. So I plugged it in. Boom! It all works.
Oh, wow.
I could not believe it. I could not believe it.
No, like
it doesn't have all the fancy...
No finding special drivers or any of that kind of stuff. It just worked.
No, it comes up as a generic human interface joystick device type thing. So that all works. It doesn't have all of the fancy apps to go with it to calibrate it and all that. But how amazing is that? That like 12 years later, you can plug a device in.
That's pretty cool.
And it still works. And I didn't mean it from like a physical point of view. I was more surprised from a Windows point of view that this thing would work. But I guess I don't know enough about it to really be talking with any authority on it. But yeah, it worked well.
That's pretty cool. Hey, this gives me an idea. So we said we were going to do this new segment on the nice pink coffee cup you got there, by the way. It's awfully cute. You got to hold the finger up while you're drinking that one.
Yep. I'll take a screenshot of this.
Yeah.
All right, I see. You've had I love it how you're laughing at me about my pink coffee cup. But everybody knows that espresso tastes better out of a pink cup. Okay?
Okay. All right.
Just saying.
Pacific Northwest. I got you. A Kiwi in the Pacific Northwest. I'll just leave it. Okay.
Yeah, exactly.
So we started this segment a couple weeks ago, and I guess we never really followed up on it with ask me anything kind of stuff. So we haven't done it in a while, but it just gave me an idea here. Like old school favorite video games back when you were a kid, right? And let's try and keep it just not console games. Let's keep it. Let's get specific. How about favorite PC game as a kid?
Yeah,
or games like 2 or 3. You go first.
Well, I think given I've just spoken about Elite, that I spent literally months of my life playing this game as a kid, and me and my childhood friend Nathaniel played it together, and so one of us would be on the joystick, one would be on the keyboard, and we just had months, entire summer holidays stuck inside playing this thing. Like, I know that sounds sad, but that's how good it was. So I think Elite, obviously, first, that was C64. Things like California Games on the C64 as well, that was just blew my mind. That was just awesome. These are what really got me into computer science and computers as a kid. Was playing these things and then writing little games with my friends. Jetpack Willie, was that what it was called?
I think so.
Something
Yeah,
like that.
Yeah, it's familiar.
Yep. And then in college, secondary school, which is what we call college, right? Which is before you go to university. Things like Wing Commander. Stuff like
that was on my list.
The Wing Commander series, that was pure genius.
Of course, yet again, we did this Ask Me Anything, and you rip off one of my ideas. Gosh.
What about you? What were your favorites?
Wing Commander was up there. Huge fan of Ultima. Huge fan of all the Ultimas.
I never really got into those ones.
Oh, I loved them. There was one called what was it? It was a Monkey's Island. Was that what it was called?
Monkey Island.
Monkey Island. Yeah. So there was that one. Yep. That was a little bit like older, but I think the one that I always went back to that I played forever with the most basic graphics. It fit on one 3.5-inch drive. Was called Command HQ, and it was like a World War III game. And you could pick Axis or Allies. You could start the game as like Axis and Allies from World War I or II. You could do NATO versus Warsaw, and sometimes depending on what you picked, you had access to like planes or subs or nuclear weapons or whatever based on the time frame you picked. And it was interesting because you had to. It was just battling away. It was capturing enough oil fields to cripple your opponent. And if you use nukes, some countries would switch sides because they didn't like the fact that you used nukes. So I loved it. It was one of those games that I kept trying to find, just like Wing Commander. Once you skip a few years of college and you go back and all of a sudden it's like, I want to play one of those old games I used to play before. And you find the discs and you put them in to your present day machine. And I tried to play Wing Commander, I think like 5 years ago. maybe 10 years ago, and the damn thing the war went so fast because the clock speeds are so much different that I couldn't keep up with it. I'm just like, is there a way to artificially slow down a machine? So
I tell you what, same sort of thing with trying to play Elite like 10 years later. But the first time I played Elite was on a C64, and you had to load it from a tape, and you had to hit play and then make sure it was getting ready to load, and that was how you did it.
Very old school. Oh.
Anyway, we could reminisce about video games all day, but how about we get on to the thrust of this episode?
I guess we better do that. Yeah.
So what we thought we'd do is go through. We had, I think, was it either the previous episode or the one right before was the episode we did on Azure resources. And we got a lot of good retweets and feedback about that. And so what we thought we'd do is go through the equivalent, but for our Office 365 and SharePoint resources. So we've kind of got it organized similarly to how we did the Azure one. We're going to walk through things like podcasts, various communities we're a part of, various resources, conferences, blogs, training, and tools and things like that, to try to group things up. Now, when we went through and we were contributing resources, we're like, again, similar to Azure, we read some of the same blogs, we use some of the same tools, and we listen to some of the same podcasts and things. So rather than trying to go back and forth between us, we're just going to go through group by group and then talk about them. Because I think we both agree that these are all of probably the top tools and resources we use on a daily or at least weekly basis in our work. So why don't we kick off with, why don't we just go from the top down on our little list here? Let's start with podcasts. So we've got 4 podcasts we listen to here. We've got the Office 365 Developer Podcast, Office 365 FM, SharePoint Podshow, and the Moss Show SharePoint Podcast. So that's 4. I listen to the 365 Developer Show and the Office 365 FM show and the SharePoint Pod Show, primarily those first 3. But you listen to all 4 of these. How do you sort of grade them in terms of audience and interest levels and sort of depth of technical depth as well?
I think so. On the SharePoint Pod Show, that one's run by Rob Foster and Brett Lonsdale.
Possibly the longest running SharePoint show by quite a long way, right?
I think so. Yeah, I think so. That one's good. That one's got a really broad audience. That one talks to everybody: IT pros, devs, 365, SharePoint on-prem, you name it. I listen to that one. That one doesn't come out very regular, but it does come out, I guess, every other month or so, maybe every month. The Moss Show SharePoint podcast, that's by Hilton Gießnow. I think I'm pronouncing that correctly, or if I'm not, I apologize. That one comes out semi-regularly. It's again, speaks to all audiences. The Office 365 FM, that one's, I think, by a couple guys. It's started by a guy, I think, in New Zealand. But it's got people, or Australia, and it's got
Australia, yeah.
Australia.
I think so.
Yeah, and it's got somebody in the US and someone in, I think, the Netherlands. That one's pretty good. They've got a really good production quality there, and they actually do a lot of, trying to do a lot of funny stuff as well. And the
for the record, their intro puts ours to complete shame.
Oh my gosh, it totally does. It totally does. And then the Office 365 developer, that one's run by your team, specifically Jeremy Thake does that one. So that one's relatively new, but Jeremy's doing a good job in having a regular delivery or regular cadence on that one.
Yeah, and his mostly focusing on, talking to different folks about various different topics as they come up and, wandering around campus and sticking a microphone in people's faces.
Yeah. You mentioned a comment about the production quality for the Office 365 FM. There's another podcast completely unrelated to what we're talking about called The Fizzle Show. It's all about marketing and entrepreneur and stuff like that. I think you listen to it too. You want to talk about good production quality? Those guys crack me up. Like they're so freaking witty, and the production quality is great, and they're absolutely freaking hilarious.
Yeah, and they're from Seattle.
They're in, Seattle, Portland, and San Diego.
Right. I didn't realize that split up.
And San Francisco. There's now 4 guys on it, but I don't know how they're split up, but they're all West Coast guys.
Gotcha.
Yep.
Yeah, so there's 4 pod shows. If people are looking podcasts, I guess I should say. If people are looking for something to listen to on the way to work in your earbuds, then those are the first 4 I would certainly start with and recommend. So go add them to your feed and have a listen. I devour podcasts. I love listening to them. Listen to them every morning on the way to work and home again, and probably sort of have about 10 or 12 of them loaded up in my phone.
Yeah, same here.
So that's audio stuff. What about we move on to communities and forums?
Yeah, so we've got 3 of them listed here. There's a lot of communities and forums out there, and I want to focus on the ones that are the ones that we have in this list here are the more, I'd say, present day and the more active ones. Communities come and go so often. First one is the Office 365 Yammer Technical Network. So that one's kind of run by Microsoft, but it's a wide open network that anybody can jump in. StackOverflow, everything tagged for Microsoft Office or SharePoint or 365 or whatever. And then community site we've talked about a few times on the podcast, ITUnity, which is still a budding and growing one, but it's got a really good group of people around it. For me, I guess for most of my forums for asking questions and getting answers and stuff, Stack Overflow is the one that I go to for everything.
Certainly for developer related stuff, right? Like Stack is like the Q&A plus some commentary on various questions and all that sort of stuff. But as I understand, it's mostly dev related. Is that your understanding?
It is, but there's also a good number of they have different Stack Overflow stacks, Stack Exchange stacks that are not just around dev, but they have them around like the IT pro and around the end user and stuff like that. I think they've got the best kind of like forum, how everything works. I'm not a really big fan of the Yammer technical network. I'm not a big fan of Yammer in the way that Yammer does stuff. I don't like the UX and stuff. So my only interaction with Yammer is through email, but there are a lot of people in it. So
it's more discussion threads and stuff like that. Whereas if I'm looking for if I've got a question and I want to answer to something dev related, my first port of call is Stack, right? Like that's my go-to spot because it's so clean and it keeps it. There's very specific rules about asking clear questions and giving clear answers.
Yep.
And then it's all community voted up or down. So it's usually the fastest way to resolution for me.
Yep. Agreed. Yeah, so our next group of resources, we just had miscellaneous resources. So how about you tackle these guys?
Yeah, so the two things that, and I'm kind of biased here because I work on the team, but the two places I start are the Office Developer Center or the Dev Center, which is at dev.office.com. And then more recently, we've been publishing everything on GitHub as much as we can. So that's github.com/officedev, DEV. And so between those two, that's kind of like the publishing point for open resources, documentation, videos, downloadable training, all that sort of stuff that we as Microsoft produce. And so I would recommend people go take a look at the new dev.office.com site. We've got more stuff coming there in the next few weeks as well. And then we're pushing everything we can to GitHub, open source samples and the documentation that goes along with them, the PNP project, various sample applications and reference examples, things like that we're pushing to GitHub. So highly recommend people go star a bunch of those repos and keep an eye on them. Yeah,
I'd agree. The Office Dev Center, the site did get a lot better recently, a lot easier to find stuff. The Office Dev on GitHub, I love what you guys are doing with that. I know that there were teams that had stuff in Codeplex, and I understand it's all open source, but there's just something about GitHub that really does a good job of fostering contributions and getting more people involved. I can't put my finger on it aside from just the UX is different and it just seems to work really well.
Yeah, it's hard to... I like your point there about it's hard to put your finger on it because technically you could do all of this on Codeplex.
Yeah.
But there's something about GitHub that is either lighter weight or easier to get involved with, or I don't know what it is, but it's just the friction is less.
When I try to explain to someone, where should I put this project? And like I have a friend, somebody we both know that has a very popular open source project, and he's got it in CodePlex right now. And then he asked me one time, why should I move it to GitHub? And I'm sitting there kind of struggling, just be like, I can't give you a technical reason why you should move it to GitHub. Being on Git, I think, is one thing I really enjoy. I like Git more than anything else, but CodePlex can do Git. So it's like, he's like, why should I do that? I'm like, I can't give you a reason other than the fact that once you flip over and you try it for a little while, you won't go back.
That is, and there's also something to be said for that is where the open source community is.
Mm-hmm.
Like, the open source community, for the most part, are not on CodePlex. They're on GitHub.
Yep.
And so a big reason for us going to GitHub and pushing all the Office developer stuff there was, like, that's where people expect open source to be.
Yeah. I mean, you're getting a bunch great example right there, the patterns and practices stuff that went out. I know it was on CodePlex. There weren't a lot of third-party contributions, but there have been a lot more contributions just in the last few weeks since you guys have had it posted. So
yeah, it's something to do with friction of getting involved, I feel.
Yep.
Okay, so what about some conferences? I know we've spoken about conferences, and gosh, there was a long, like episode 4, yeah? It was a long time ago. So some conferences we've got coming up here are SP Live 360, SP TechCon, SharePoint Evolutions Conference is another really popular conference that comes from time to time, right? It's not every single year. That's based in the UK. SharePoint Intersections as well. That's coming up later this year. And then we've got all of the community little ones that we don't have listed here because there's so many of them. But I suggest people go check out. There's SharePoint Palooza coming up in Branson, Missouri that Mark Rackley organizes. That's one I'm going to go talk at. That's next month. And then also SPSevents.org,
Yep.
Which are the sort of the SharePoint Saturday events. Those are community organized, lightweight, small, one-day led events all over the world. And, I went to the website, I think last week I was showing somebody, and there is loads of them coming up. It's incredible to see. So definitely highly recommend everybody go check out spsevents.org.
Yeah, we don't have a ton of events listed here. I would recommend you go check out the show notes from episode 4, one of the first podcasts, the fourth podcast that we did. But I'd go back and check those. We got a lot of links to those things. For me, I mean, it's the one that we're failing to mention here, but we are not going to have it in the show notes because there's really no link to point you to, and that's the Unified Technology Conference that Microsoft will have next May in Chicago. That's going to cover everything. So
the yet to be named conference.
Yeah, and it's you definitely want to hit that one up. But yeah, I'm a really big fan of the Evolutions Conference over in London. I'm also a very big fan of SP TechCon and SP Live 360. I really like those conferences. I think they have a really good energy around them. Nothing to take away from any of the other shows, but I'm a big fan of those guys, and whenever I can be involved in those, I like to definitely go through an earmark and be a part of those. So
yeah, the SharePoint Intersections one I like because it's not just SharePoint and Office 365.
Mm-hmm.
You can go along to that conference, and they've got .NET stuff going on for pure devs. They've got SQL stuff going on. They've got the angle brackets stuff going on, which is just sort of pure front-end web. You got everything all in one spot, and so you can sort of jump between different sessions on completely different topics, and you're not just stuck with the SharePoint folks the whole time.
Yeah, it's very, very similar. It's exactly how the SP Live goes together too. It used to be VS Live, and they got the same thing with mobile and Azure. They have some different tracks, but yeah, two very good options, and they're both the SP Live. The SP Live 360, SP TechCon, and SharePoint Intersections, those are held multiple times throughout the year, anywhere from 2 to 4 times. Just depends on the show. So definitely recommend checking those out.
Yeah, nice. You can always go to conferences. There's always stuff going on, right? Like that's the thing. It's hard to list them all here, and we don't do them all justice. But there are lots going on, and pretty easy to get to one. They're always happening. So
yeah, talk about not doing any of them justice. Let's move on to blogs. And I'm just going to preface this right now that we are going to leave a lot of people out that should be on this list, And
Yep.
this is not in an order of preference, nor is it in any order that the fact that, I'm going to read them out, and it doesn't mean that you don't feel the same way about them or whatever. So throw some names out there. Big disclaimer. So when someone comes up with pitchforks and everything to try and take us out at the next conference because we didn't name their blog, apologies. I subscribe to over 200 SharePoint bloggers in my Feedly subscriptions. So here we go. I'm just going to throw them out here, and then I'd like to single a few people out, but I'm just going to throw them out. Chris O'Brien, Scot Hillier, Wictor Wilen, Spence Harbar, Eric Shupps, Kirk Evans, Marc Anderson, Laura Rogers, Tobias Zimmergren, Todd Baginski, Chris Johnson, Andrew Connell. Guess who wrote those down?
Yeah.
Jeremy Thake, Vesa. Oh, I never get this right.
Juvonen.
Vesa Juvonen, Corey Roth, Vincent Rothwell, Mark Rackley, and Matt McDermott. There's a whole slew of them. There are some people that I will never unsubscribe from, and everything they say on their blogs is just
I'm just going to call out that you've missed Checks.
Oh, shoot.
I'm only kidding. Okay. I just that's the first one that popped into my mind that you missed off the list. Hey, I'm going to send him a mail and make sure he realizes you missed him off your list.
Hey, now hold on a minute. Now we were both collaborating on this list together, and so we both we were doing this last week. We were sharing the screen at the same time.
Hey, I blame it all on you. No, I'm only kidding.
No, there's great content on there. There's a lot of people that have specific disciplines that they go with, and like some blogs are much more like Matt McDermott is focused primarily on search. Mark Rackley and Marc Anderson are focused more on the client side and JavaScript kind of stuff. Spence Harbar is more on the IT pro kind of side. So there's a whole slew of them. I love all of these. They're fantastic. Highly recommend all of them.
Yeah. What can I add there? We'll add links to all of these folks in the show notes. Just go add them to your Feedly or whatever tool you use.
Do you have a favorite?
A favorite blogger?
I have one. That every time he posts, it's always like, I got to go read that.
I would say Chris O'Brien from a dev point of view.
I got to stop asking you questions. Stop stealing my answer.
There you go. You should stop asking me first. You should say, hey, Chris O'Brien's my favorite. Whose is yours? And then I'd be stumped.
SharePoint nuts and bolts.
Chris is...
I love his blog. Yeah.
Chris has really... what's the right word?
Deep.
I think deep. Yeah, deep. There you go. Deep technical dev-related podcast blog posts, which always pleasantly surprise me. There you go.
Yeah, and deep, not like holy crap, that's really interesting from a geeky techie point of view, but it's never going to apply to me in the real world. Deep, as in it's very comprehensive, talking about something that you are going to be using, that you use in your day-to-day stuff, or you may not use it, but it's nice knowing that's something I'm going to come back to.
Yeah, and I think we're probably a little biased, right? Because he's more on the dev side, and so are we. So I'm sure there's equally, if not equally, good IT pro related ones too.
Oh, absolutely, there absolutely are.
So yeah. Go grab all those blog feeds and stick them in Feedly or whatever your tool of choice is, and scan them. I'd probably scan Feedly, every couple of days and catch up on the blog posts that are going on.
Yep. Same here. I have a scheduled task that tells me once a week or once every 2 weeks, dive in and just look at everything and see what's there.
Quick look. Yeah.
Yep.
Hey, so on training, I know this is sort of your neck of the woods. Given your history and all of the stuff you've been involved with over the years, training is obviously a thing that you've been madly involved with businesses revolving around it. So rattling off a couple of training ports of call here. The Office Dev Center training, dev.office.com/training. That's where we're going to, as Microsoft, we're going to start linking off to some of the training we're putting out and things. So that's the stuff from us. But what are some of the others that you've looked at in the past? Maybe that you've worked at in the past.
Or owned in the past.
Yeah, they owned in the past, yeah.
Yeah, like you said, this is a world that I've been in really since 2007. So I first started training for MindSharp, big SharePoint training company that's still very good. But I was one of the co-founders and owners all the way up until early 2013 of Critical Path Training, which now is run fully by Ted Pattison. I still teach for those guys, but the content's absolutely fabulous. I don't want to do a sales pitch, but it's a great training option. I know that a company that is much more international in terms of Europe and Africa and Asia and Australia is Combined Knowledge, which is the same group that runs the SharePoint Evolutions Conference. And those are all of the ones we've mentioned are really, I guess, MindSharp, Critical Path Training, and Combined Knowledge. Those are all primarily in-person, hands-on, classroom-based training. They'll have an online component as well, but it's primarily instructor-led. You guys, the Office Dev Center, I know that's primarily going to be recorded on demand kind of stuff. And the other big player in that space is Pluralsight, where I've done a significant amount of work with them as well. They've got a huge SharePoint and 365 catalog. I think it's over 10 or 15% of their entire catalog is Office 365 / SharePoint related, which, I mean, they've got a couple thousand courses, I think, up to 2,000 courses now. Or maybe more than that. That is, so that's a sizable chunk.
That's amazing. Yeah, I went on Pluralsight the other day and wanted to look up a Entity Framework course. You know, I had some questions about Code First Entity Framework, and so of course Julie Luhrmann's courses up on there. She's a legend when it comes to Entity Framework and SQL related stuff like that. So yeah, and you know, so it's a really good mixture of not just SharePoint and Office stuff, but you know, everything dev related.
Mm-hmm. Not just dev.
Technical training right across the board. Oh, now they've expanded out. That's right.
Yeah, they bought. Oh wow, I just forgot their name. Train Signal, I think. And so they have all IT Pro, the same amount of IT Pro related content. They bought a company called Digital Tutors, which is like all like a 3G and art and gaming and all that kind of stuff. And they bought an open source company called Peepcode. So they've got it's a ridiculous catalog. If you're in the whole on demand training thing and you like video training, it's $30 a month. It's like to me, it's as important of having a subscription to those guys as it is as having an internet connection and a cell phone.
Yeah, you know, I find once you actually get a subscription to them, you start using those. I know this sounds stupid, but you start going there to go find how to do something more than trying to scour the internet to try to find an article. Because you know that they're going to have the experts talking about the topic.
Yep.
And so like this Entity Framework one, I didn't bother like searching the internet and scouring for the perfect article. I went straight to Pluralsight, looked up Entity Framework, saw Julie's courses, and then dived straight into the one I wanted to watch.
And you get an explanation as well. I'm doing the same thing. I'm working on our startup right now, the client side, trying to do a lot of automated testing. And so testing JavaScript, testing Angular, testing type, and well, I don't really test TypeScript. And then, but doing the automation of tests with like Jasmine and using Gulp and so much stuff there. I'm just like, it's a quick little searches like, oh, there's tons of stuff to find here. So I'm just on a little rant there. I'm sick of these little JavaScript frameworks coming up with all these cutesy names like Gulp and Grunt and stuff. When you start searching for it on the internet, you get a whole slew of all kinds of crap.
Oh, what are you doing? I'm gulping and grunting.
Yeah, I'm gulping and grunting, and I'm trying to find testing. And you find some interesting stuff.
Yeah, I guess gulp is not exactly a word that. I mean, you'd find all sorts of things on the internet.
I have
not JavaScript frameworks with that.
You know, there was a time that I used to be afraid of when you would stumble across something on the internet, and you're like, I wonder if my ISP is tracking this stuff, and does this get me in trouble with someone, right? And these days now with all the stuff that all these names and are using so much kind of mixed content showing up on the internet, now it's like I cannot be raising a red flag. There's got to be other people that are doing some really bad stuff that's going to be raising a red flag.
Oh yeah, it's like the time I accidentally searched for porn at work. Yeah.
Oh, big mistake, huh?
Yeah, that's a different story entirely. But anyway,
I got a funny story about that one too.
We'll have to do an outtakes episode and just caveat it with like an R rating, and then I can tell you that story. That's funny. Anyway, so training, we got Critical Sharp, the Office Dev Center, MindSharp, and some Pluralsight stuff, and Combined Knowledge for some more of a global sort of reach. What about tools? Like I've got some interesting tools that I'm sure others have used it as well. So why don't we go through a few of those? I think probably the top of the list for me, for anything Office 365 related, is Fiddler. It doesn't really matter what I'm doing. I've always got Fiddler at the ready. You can watch traffic, HTTP traffic between your machine and the server, and see all the stuff going back and forth. And it's completely invaluable for modern Office 365 development, watching what's going on between the two, making sure you're making your REST calls correctly, seeing the raw payloads come back, those sorts of things. And then also, to go along with Fiddler, there is an add-in to Fiddler from Kirk Evans that you've put on your GitHub now. I think you've got a repo for it, right?
Yeah.
Which is it's an add-in to help you deal with, or help you get good insight into the authentication process between your code and Office 365. And so it helps sort of pull all the packets apart and shows you breaks down the JOT tokens, the JWT tokens, or payloads, I should say, and sort of splits them out into a nice UI. So it's much easier to deal with than just watching the raw stuff fly back and forth. So that's one I definitely recommend people go get as a sort of a debug tool. The other one is the Office 365 API tools. So this is a tool put out by Microsoft. It's an extension to Visual Studio that the developer division put out. So the same folks that build the tools for SharePoint and Office development right into Visual Studio put out this API tool. And this really adds a whole lot of additional things that you can wire up in your project. So, for example, connecting to the Office 365 preview APIs, wiring up the Azure AD authentication flow, what we internally call a common consent flow, and things like that. So that's the first extension I go add whenever I install Visual Studio. How about you? What are a couple of your favorites?
Well, you just listed off a bunch of them. Big fan of Fiddler. Big fan of the Fiddler extension that Kirk Evans did, and it's on my GitHub because Kirk didn't want to make it, like, as a Microsoft guy, didn't want to make it his or whatever. So he's just like, "Can you help me post this?" I'm like, "I'll post it, but I'm giving you all the credit." I guess the ones that everyone's going to look for, the ULS viewer, that's a big one. CKS Dev, that's another big one for extending the tools. The one that doesn't give you, when Microsoft hasn't given you everything that you would want. Or
what do you mean?
Yeah. There's every once in a while, I guess people still run into needing Camel, and so there's the Camel Designer 2013. There's also SharePoint Manager is another popular one. There's one more, and then I'm going to give you a commercial one. There's one called the SharePoint 2013 Search Tool that the search crowd really enjoys. I guess before I go into the commercial one, there's one that the thing that I'm probably one of the biggest fans of, and I think is it's similar to Fiddler. It is the most underutilized developer tool that is available to every single developer out there. And pick your browser, but the developer tools that are in the browser. For me, I use Chrome, and I think that it is invaluable with how much stuff you can do with the developer tools. I spend more time in the developer tools in Chrome than I do inside Fiddler these days. It's really impressive what you can do, and I really like add-ins for like Angular, and there's one called Page Speed, which is wickedly cool for detecting like are JavaScript files minified? If they're not, could you combine them? Are images
like tips and tricks to optimize your page?
It's part of that, but it's part of like, if you went through, and it's great if you go through and you take page speed and you point it to a site, open it up while it inspects the site and take a look at it. It says, hey, look, all these JavaScript files, some of these aren't compressed. You could compress these, and if you compressed each one of them, you'd save 13% here, 15% here, this one here, and overall you'd save 67% on all your JavaScript.
Wow, that's cool.
It found in one site that I frequent, it found where they were actually using the exact same JavaScript file on multiple pages, but referencing it both by HTTP and HTTPS, and the browser sees that as two different files.
Oh yeah, 2 different cached versions and everything.
And it was identical file. So
Brutal.
that, images, and a whole bunch of other stuff. It's pretty darn impressive. There's one last tool that I definitely would recommend everyone check out. It's called the SharePoint Code Analysis Framework, or SPCAF. It does a lot of different things. I would say it's similar to like a ReSharper specifically for SharePoint. It's a pretty darn impressive tool. It does a significant amount of stuff. I think there's a free version of it, but then there's a commercial version that's very, very, very slick. It's very powerful. So definitely check it out.
Yeah, we're recommending people use this. Pardon me. We recommend people use this if they want to move to Office 365 and they've got some custom code that they've written for on-premises. Then they can use SPCAF to put the WSP in, and it'll give a report of what's in there and kind of what code you've got in there and all that sort of stuff, and then what some options on how to move that to the Office 365 friendly version.
No way, that's pretty cool.
Yeah,
I know the guy that actually one of the guys behind this too, so that's cool to see it being so well received.
Yeah, we actually list it up on dev.office.com. There's a new section up there called Transform, and if you go into dev.office.com/transform, it's the first tool off the block that we recommend people go take a look at.
Wow, check a look at that. That's really good. Well, that's a big win by them.
Yeah, we worked pretty closely with them on getting a free version for people to use to really get into it, and then obviously getting the paid versions that do a bunch more after that. But they're great to work with, and the tool's cool. So it's very much very worthwhile. Excellent. All right. So we've talked a lot about from the top. We talked about podcasts, some resources, various conferences, blogs, training, and then finally tools and things like that. Any sort of final thoughts you got on this stuff, AC?
Only that we are absolutely positive that we've missed a lot of stuff. It's a massive community. It's a massive world. It's a huge business. We can't hit everything, but I mean, these are the ones that I look at, because if something else is out there, I'm going to find it through one of these different vehicles. Yeah,
for sure. And something I'd add to this is every time we put out a podcast, we blog about it on the MicrosoftCloudShow.com and post about it. So folks can, if they feel like they've got tools or podcasts or blogs that we've missed or want to share with everybody, then go up to the blog and leave a comment with a link off to those resources that you use, and share them with the world.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, if you got some great ones there, we'll definitely highlight it on the show in future episodes. Like we kind of said at the end of the last episode, we would love to have some interaction on the blog or on the place where the podcasts are actually posted. Both of them are on MicrosoftCloudShow.com. We have discuss comments set up there, so it's super easy to put a comment up, email updates, and all that kind of stuff. Just love to have a conversation, love to have a dialogue with it. So keeping it right there. And if you have any show ideas, go through. Definitely post some show ideas that you've got. We got a cool one coming up after this one to address a bunch of questions and comments and requests that we've had from people around business intelligence. So we got interviewing someone from the BI team later this week for, I think, what is that going to be, episode 44? I guess is what it'll come out. So
excellent. Yeah. Oh, that sounds exciting. Yep. Yeah, it's one of those topics I don't know a whole ton about. I know the glossy bits at the top, but none of the depth. So I'll look forward to that one.
Same here. I know about a bunch of words that start with the word power, and out on the other end comes out a bunch of cool, pretty colorful graphs.
Whizzy graphs, baby, for the win.
Cool.
All right. Well, thanks, AC. It's been a great show. I hope people find this useful.
I totally agree, man. Good show, and we will talk soon.
Cheers. If you have a question for us, go to MicrosoftCloudShow.com/questions, where you can submit it as text or record it as a WAV or MP3 and provide a link so we can play your question on the show. You can subscribe to us in iTunes by searching for Microsoft Cloud Show or via RSS, at microsoftcloudshow.com, where you'll also find a full transcript and show notes of each episode. You can also find us on Facebook, searching for Microsoft Cloud Show, or on Twitter at MS Cloud Show. Thanks for listening. We'll see you next time.